Welcome to Slash Forward, and to Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Let's get to it. This movie opens on an older Tommy Jarvis taking an evening drive with his bud, planning to complete some acclimation therapy by digging up and destroying Jason's body. As they arrive at the headstone and begin digging, the weather takes a turn for the worse.
Okay, there's your proof. There's his coffin. Let's go.
No, you gotta go all the way. Tommy beasts out and pulls free a wrought iron picket, driving it into Jason's corpse, and thus begins his true therapy session. Tommy goes to get the gas can, but his lightning rod does its job before he's able, drawing in 2 bolts. Just enough to kickstart Jason back to life. When Tommy climbs out of the pit, Jason grabs him. Tommy gets the gas can and attempts to light a match, but is thwarted by Mother Nature, who is apparently fine with this abomination. His partner steps up and breaks a shovel across Jason's back. Unfortunately, it's not quite enough, and he gets his heart punched out. Tommy wisely runs off and goes straight to the sheriff's office. However, their energy just doesn't match, and the sheriff doesn't take kindly to Jason talk in these parts, having relegated the town's history to a mere urban legend like this is Elm Street or something. Since they do things their own way around here, he promptly puts Tommy in the cage, with the intention of having him escorted out of town the next day. We then cut to a couple driving through the woods looking for a camp. They have a showdown with Jason, who's blocking their path. They make the smart choice of backing away slowly, but get stuck in a mud hole that apparently wasn't there when they were traveling forward. He tries to scare Jason off with the tiny revolver and gets crotch jousted. Then she flops around in a puddle for a few seconds before getting staked. The next morning we find out that these two were the head counselors for the new version of Camp Crystal Lake, which is also staffed by the sheriff's daughter Megan and her friends. They arrive at the station to ask for an APB on the head counselors. Tommy takes this opportunity to fill them in on the deets about Jason, and Megan feels an instantaneous animal attraction to this bad boy. The sheriff decides to run them off and deport Tommy himself, lest his innocent daughter's reputation become soiled. Back at the cemetery, Martin, afraid that he'll be viewed as a slacker for allowing the desecration of a grave, does a quick body check and then fills it back in. At camp, we see the remaining counselors stocking up when the kids arrive, and it becomes apparently obvious that the ratio of adults to children is way off right from the start. It is likely to only get worse as time goes on. Before we get into that though, we are shown a group of corporate psychopaths engaged in a team building exercise in the woods. The main thing to take away from this is that they provide Jason with a machete, and they all die. As Tommy is leading the way out of town, he decides to take a last-ditch detour to the cemetery, and it almost runs the full gauntlet before being taken down, and subsequently discovers the grave has been covered over. The officers show how far they're willing to take it when they point guns at his face and hit him with some hyper-aggressive threats.
Wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
Yeah, you are. They escort him to the county line, threaten his life once more for good measure, and then head back. That night, while Martin is wandering through the woods, he gets glassed by his beloved, the ultimate betrayal. Attracted by the noise, this rando comes upon the grisly scene and attempts to flee with his new fiancée. And they barely make it to his moped before getting kebabbed. We then transition to this RV where a couple of youngsters are enjoying some jazzercise style intercourse. It's super great, which we know because Court keeps saying it, hoping to make it true. They get interrupted by a sudden power outage. Court takes a look and finds the plug mangled. They make the smart choice and decide to skedaddle. However, their momentary absence provided Jason enough time to stow away. So, as Court drives recklessly down the road and jams out, his date is stuck in the bathroom, also getting jammed out. Court then gets knifed deep in the temple and flips this bitch. Meanwhile, the police have found the first victims in the woods. The sheriff assumes this was Tommy taking extreme steps to convince everyone of Jason's return. He leaves Megan alone at the station, resulting in her getting a call from Tommy trying to warn the police again about Jason's return. Armed with knowledge, he has a plan to defeat him, and Megan suggests coming to pick him up to help him gather his supplies. Right about then, Jason finally arrives at the camp. Sissy hears a noise outside her cabin and, assuming it's a prank, attempts to counter-prank, which garners no response. So she begins to lean out and see what's going on, but ends up being pulled into the abyss. Meanwhile, Megan and Tommy are stocked up and on their way to camp when they hit a roadblock. Never one to turn down a thrill ride, Megan crams Tommy's face into her crotch and gasses it. She puts in a valiant effort, but eventually finds herself blocked off by her dad, who doesn't hesitate to bear down on her with a shotgun. Back at the station, they get more news of discovered bodies and argue about the Tommy versus Jason dilemma. Megan then asks a pertinent question.
What time did this happen?
What difference is that?
Do you even investigate, bro? Megan was with Tommy at the time of the murders. Still not totally convinced, the sheriff goes to the camp and leaves Tommy locked up. Back at camp, Paula, the final counselor, falls victim, leaving the kids unsupervised and at risk of death. At the jail, Megan and Tommy play some mind games and get the upper hand on the deputy, who is now on the receiving end of his own killer line.
You bang.
His submission indicates he believes Megan would actually pull the trigger, which is pretty hardcore. On the way to camp, we find the plan is to drown Jason at the original point of his death to get rid of him for good. Already there is the sheriff, whose presence draws Jason off the children. Sheriff Garris checks the children and finds a bloody scene as his 2 officers get picked off one by one. Tommy gets in position with his log chain and Atlas stone, but Megan starts calling for help, drawing attention to herself. Worried for her safety, the sheriff takes action, putting the boots to Jason and getting himself folded in half the hard way. From there, Jason, apparently harboring some deep insecurities, is easily easily distracted with a few insults, and willingly wades into the water after Tommy. Tommy lights the lake on fire and manages to get the chain around his neck, but gets pulled under in the process. Megan swims out to check on Tommy, who appears to be playing hippo in the water. When Jason shows signs of life, she puts a prop in his face and chums the water good, ending the story. For now. We close on this installment with Jason alive, but stuck under the water at Camp Crystal Lake. And that was the 6th installment. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.